This is Brian Terrian from the Disability Digest with my good friend Dr. Glenn Livingston. Glenn, thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me here, my friend.
Yes. I've been looking forward to this. So, for those of you listening out there, Glenn and I have known each other for a long time, but he has been on an absolute tear by helping people understand how to never binge again.
To
And
help a million people a year. That's what
million
we want to do.
people a year. That's fantastic. So, I asked you to come out, as I said to you, and I'm going to mention to everybody else, is that the strategy and what you've been doing to help people never binge again in the food category certainly has an impact on people that are here as an audience at the Disability Digest. So somebody might be working full time and or going through the approval process or already on their disability benefits, and I see applications for better health than what you're teaching people to do everywhere. So I am grateful for you taking the time today. So
Thanks, buddy. I'm happy to be here.
yeah. So let's get into it. Like, how did this all start? Like, can you give us, how you and a little bit about your experience and how you found yourself in this space in
Well,
this area, Glenn?
do you ever recall going to a supermarket and they were out of Pop-Tarts?
Personally, no.
Well, see, if that ever happened to you, it's probably because I was there first.
Okay.
Or a pizza place that couldn't serve you, or maybe a Dunkin' Donuts was out of Munchkins. That was probably me. When I was 17, I'm 6'4", I'm kind of muscular, and I figured out that if I worked out for 2 or 3 hours a day, I could really eat whatever I wanted to. And I would eat boxes of Pop-Tarts and muffins and Munchkins and pizza and really anything else that wasn't nailed down. And I didn't think it was a problem. I thought it was a great trick. I spent an awful lot of time exercising, an awful lot of time eating, and an awful lot of time recovering from eating. But I was thin, and I was happy, and I lived to eat and work out and go to the bathroom. And when I got a little older, I was 23 or 24, and I was married, and I was commuting 2 hours each way to graduate school, I found that I didn't have the time to work out, but I couldn't let go of the food. It's like the foods had a life of their own, and I couldn't make the adjustment to eat less and keep my weight down. And I started gaining weight and gaining weight and gaining weight. And being a psychologist from a family of 17 psychologists, psychotherapists, I figured that I probably had a hole in my heart. There was something really troubling me, and that if I could only figure out how to fill the hole in my heart, that I wouldn't have to fill the hole in my stomach. So I went to the best psychologists and psychiatrists. This is over the course of many, many years. Went to the best psychologists and psychiatrists, and I took medication. I was in Overeaters Anonymous for a couple of years. I even did my own 40,000 person study on the internet when clicks were really cheap. And I learned a lot from those endeavors. They were very soulful. I don't regret doing them. It's a good part of why I am who I am. And I also I also believe that there's more to learn from that soulful kind of inquiry into why you choose the particular foods that you choose. But every time I would get a little better and then a lot worse, a little better and a lot worse. So I didn't go like on a straight line up to 280 pounds. It was, down 30, up 35, right? Down 25, up 35. And I just kept on gaining and gaining and gaining. And somewhere in my early 40s, I stopped weighing myself after a big business crisis. And I think I worked myself up to about 280. I don't think I'd met you yet, Brian. I think we met like 2005, 2006 or something like that.
Sounds right.
So this is just before that. Maybe I was 39, 40. And somewhere around there I came across three things that really flipped my paradigm and made a world of difference. And I'll tell you that the end result of all this was deciding that managing your food and dealing with cravings was more like capturing and caging a rabid animal than nurturing your inner wounded child back to health. You had to take more of an alpha wolf, superior animal approach. And if you think about the alpha wolf, if it's challenged for leadership in a pack, it doesn't say, oh my goodness, someone needs a hug, right? It says, get back in line or I'll kill you. And so there were three things that brought me to that conclusion. One was a man named Jack Trimpey wrote a book called Rational Recovery, and he works largely with the black and white addictions, drugs, alcohol, things that you can give up entirely, as opposed to something like food where you have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block 3 times a day. And what he said, though, which was really interesting, was that the seed of addiction was in the lizard or reptilian brain. It's kind of the earliest evolved part of our anatomy, part of our neurology. And that the reptilian brain doesn't know love. The neurology a little bit, and I put this all together. The reptilian brain, when it sees something in the environment, it says, do I eat it, do I mate with it, or do I kill it? It's like that old drinking game, except with different words. Eat, mate, or kill. There's no love there. And so I said, that's really interesting. How can you love yourself out of an addiction if the part of your brain that's addicted doesn't know what love is? That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy.
And so yeah, it's really heavy, man. That's like really heavy, man.
It is.
So this is the problem with doing an interview with your friends. I'm actually a very sophisticated doctor. I'm capable of being more professional. So that was one thing that said, okay, so I think that I have to use the upper part of my brain to take control of the lower part of my brain. And the upper part of your brain, you know, there's the mammalian brain and then there's the neocortex. The mammalian brain says, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact is that going to have on the people that you love? What impact does that have on your tribe and your family? And that's kind of the seat of emotion and you know, all of the caring about connection to tribe and everything like that. But then there's the neocortex, which is superior still and can inhibit both the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain. And the neocortex says, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does this have on your long-term goals and dreams? What impact does this have on the kind of person you see yourself as? What impact will this have on your ability to engage in spiritual pursuits and art and music and creativity and everything that we think of as uniquely human, including the ability to make a diet or weight loss plan and stick to it? And so what I said, what's really happening here at the moment of addiction, when your lizard brain says, hey, chocolate comes from a cocoa bean which grows on a plant and therefore it's a vegetable, what's really happening is that the lizard brain is kind of tricking the mammalian brain and the neocortex into giving up control. And I decided that it was going to have to be the opposite. I was going to have to recognize those situations and take charge. Two other things happened around that time. The second thing that happened was that I've been doing a lot of consulting for Big Food, and I saw that there were billions of dollars that went into engineering these hyper-palatable food-like substances, concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins, and it's all designed and engineered to hit your bliss point without giving you enough nutrition to feel satisfied. And I said, whoa, wait a minute here. That's an overwhelming force. There are billions of dollars targeting my lizard brain. That has nothing to do with how my mama didn't love me enough when I was 5 or how I was brought up or anything like that. It's nothing to do with a hole in my heart. That's just an overwhelming external force which probably requires a significant defense. Then I looked at the advertising industry and I realized that they package things up in such a way as to make us believe that we need them for survival. So for example, I remember talking to a VP of a major food bar manufacturing company, who shall remain nameless so they don't sue my ass. And he told me that their most profitable insight was when they took the vitamins out of the bar and they made the packaging look healthy instead. So they had all these vibrant colors, which were reminiscent of a big salad in the wild, right? If you see, the reason we're so responsive to color is because the diversity of colors signals the diversity of availability of micronutrients. So if you have a salad with all the colors of the rainbow, some purple cabbage and red tomatoes and blueberries and carrots and green lettuce and et cetera, you're ensuring yourself a diversity of nutrition, and that's a good thing. So I said, so wait a minute, what you're telling me is that you're faking us out. You made the package look like it was really nutritious, but you actually took the nutrition out. And he kind of hung his head in shame and said, yes, Glenn, that's exactly what we're doing. And I don't mean to single them out because that goes on all across the industry. So big food is, big food is engineering the substances. Go on.
Yeah, so big food has a major influence from big tobacco.
Yeah.
They've just changed the product. Very interesting. Yes, continue.
Well, and then, I don't mean to single out the food bar because there were 5,000 to 7,000 messages beamed at us every year through the internet and the airwaves about food. And if you look really carefully, only about a half dozen of them are to get you to eat more fruits and vegetables. Mm-hmm. Because there's not a lot of money in promoting whole fruits and vegetables, right? They're all aimed at getting you to eat more of these bags and boxes and containers. And every time you're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat with a white suit and a mustache that's laughing all the way to the bank.
Well said.
I worked on that for a while. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So then the addiction treatment industry says, you can't quit this stuff even if you want to. The best you can do is abstain one day at a time because you are the victim of a chronic, progressive, mysterious disease that's doing push-ups in the closet even when you're not doing this stuff. And there's some impulses against which humans can't defend themselves. And so I thought, wow, this is a perfect storm of external forces that are telling people the wrong thing, mm-hmm. getting people to do the wrong thing, and has nothing to do with what my mama said. So then the last thing had to do with what my mama said. So I did this study, and there are 40,000 people that take the survey over the course of several years on the internet when clicks are cheap. And I asked people, what stresses you out? This is a longer questionnaire, but what stresses you out? And what foods can't you stop eating when you start?
Ooh, good.
I found 3 things. It's really interesting, actually. It was useless, but really interesting. The first thing I found was that people who struggle with chocolate like I do, because my binges usually started with chocolate, they tended to be lonely or brokenhearted or depressed. People who struggled with salty, crunchy things like chips and pretzels, they tended to be stressed at work. And people who struggled with chewy, soft things like bread and bagels or pizza, they tended to be stressed at home. And I said, that's really cool. So I decided before I'm going to start talking to clients about this, I better figure it out for myself because I was still fat. And I asked my mom, who was not only my mom who raised me, but she was a psychotherapist. So she knew a thing or two about these talks. And I said, Mom, why is it that when I feel, I'm in a bad marriage and you know about all that, but why is it that when I feel stressed or lonely or brokenhearted that I go running to chocolate? And she gets this horrible look on her face and this horrible senator voice. She goes, honey, I'm so sorry. I said, Mom, what is it? She goes, I'm so sorry, honey, but... And I said, Mom, whatever it is, it's 40 years ago, I forgive you. We're just trying to figure this out. She said, well, in 1965, you were 1 year old, and your dad was a captain in the Army, and they were talking about sending him to Vietnam. And I was terrified because we had another one on the way, or at least we're working on it. And I thought I'm going to be a Army widow with 2 young kids, and I just spent a lot of time staring at the wall. At the same time, my dad, your grandfather, had just gotten out of prison. And you know what, honey? He was guilty. he was actually doing these things, and I'd idolized him my whole life, and my whole world fell apart. And so I was just really depressed and anxious, and I didn't have the wherewithal to hug you and love you and snuggle you when you needed it, or even to feed you the healthy food that you deserved. So I got a big bottle of chocolate Tabasco syrup, and I put it in a refrigerator by the floor. And whenever you came running to me, if I didn't have the energy, I'd say, honey, go get your Basso. And you'd go running over to the chocolate Tabasco syrup, and you'd suck on the bottle, and you'd go into a chocolate chip coma. And I said, I looked at her, and Brian, if this was the movie, if this would never have struggled with chocolate again. And we did have a hug and kind of a metaphorical cry. This was over Skype. And it was a good conversation to have because I could forgive myself in a lot of ways. I could be softer on myself. I could forgive my mom. It led to all kinds of other thoughts and questions. But in the end, you know that rather than ending my chocolate program, it made it worse. Do you want to guess why?
You've got me on this one. I'm thinking that now that you realize it, well, you're a grown adult. I'm processing here.
The reason it got worse is because there was this little voice in my head, and it went something like this. Hey, Glenn, you're right. Our mama didn't love us enough. And she left a great big chocolate-sized hole in our heart. And until we can get out of this marriage and find the love of our life, we're going to have to keep on binging on chocolate. Yippee, let's go get some right now.
Okay.
Became the voice of justification. And at that point, I recognized that, you could have a really intense fire in a fireplace. Let's say the emotion is the fire. You could have an intense fire, a roaring fire in the living room with a really good fireplace, and that becomes the center of hearth and home. Memories are formed, people gather around, they tell stories, it's perfectly safe. But if there are holes in that fireplace, then even one ash escaping can burn down the house.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was that voice of justification was poking holes in my fireplace. And it didn't matter that I had this raging fire. I mean, it could take a lifetime to find the love of your life. And, you don't know. I mean, how do you work through the depression and things that happen in your past? Talk to any therapist. That could take 10 years. But that voice of justification, building a better fireplace, was a lot quicker, and it was a lot easier to disempower. So this is the embarrassing part. This is what I did. This was going to be a private thing. I was never going to publish this. I decided that I was going to draw really bright lines to distinguish healthy versus unhealthy eating. For example, I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. And then I decided that if I heard any little voice in my head trying to justify having chocolate on a weekday, like for example, hey Glenn, you worked out really hard today, it's not going to make a difference, you could start tomorrow, no big deal. I decided that was my pig squealing for pig slop. The chocolate itself on a weekday was pig slop.
Pig slop.
And I would say pig slop. That was my pig. What it was saying was pig slop. My lizard brain was my pig. The things it said were pig squeal, and what it was squealing for was pig slop. And I would say, I don't eat pig slop, and I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And as crude and ridiculous as that sounds, it would give me those extra microseconds at the moment of impulse to wake up and remember who I was and wanted to be with regards to food. And very slowly, I recovered my sense of power. It wasn't a miracle like the next day I was all better, but I started to recognize that I had the power of choice. And then eventually I realized that nobody was telling me what to eat. I could make my own rules. So it was kind of silly to make rules that I wasn't going to keep, so I'd make rules that I would keep. And before you knew it, I was not binging anymore. I felt like I had power. Sometimes I would choose to break the rules, but I always felt like it was my choice and I could get back on a lot quicker. And before you knew it, I started losing weight and, came down from about 280 to 200. I think 280 because I stopped weighing myself at about 257. And my psoriasis improved, my rosacea improved, my triglycerides came down. All these great things happened.
Huh.
We published it. We published it. It took off, and now I walk around telling people that I got a pig inside me, and I don't. That farm animals tell me what to do.
That's cool. I mean, I look at your experience and what you've done. You could, in my opinion, you could do pretty much whatever you wanted. I mean, you've been published in New York Times, Washington Post, Daily News. You've been all over the place. You've had different businesses, and so to do this and put it out there and put that effort into it, good for you. Good for you.
Thanks.
So you're changing. So here's my next area of questioning, and I'll use a few examples. And you know about the disability world, and those of you that are listening out there have in large part Dr. Glenn Livingston to thank for where we are today, because he worked with me in the very beginning of this. So you do understand the process or the general concept here. But here's some of the challenges that I see that we face, and perhaps you can relate your experience and how you're teaching others to a few examples. All right? So several debilitating conditions have to do with food. One recent example is we had an individual who wasn't going to be able to go through the disability approval process, Glenn, because her body mass index was too high. And the reason why she was going to go through was she wasn't able to stand because she had chronic pain in her knees, but because the body mass index was too high, the doctors wouldn't operate to help her fix her knees so that she could be relieved of pain, because the extra weight would be prohibitive of the recovery. And so
I hear that story all the time.
yeah, so she's like, I'm trying, I'm doing all different. So that's one example, and I'm going to give you another one, and we'll kind of come back and see if you break these down by individuals. Truck drivers, who work with a lot of truck drivers. Truck drivers are subject to eating that wonderful food that you explained that is not very nourishing, and one of the common problems that they develop is diabetes. So their sugar gets out of control, and it causes lots of problems with their attentiveness, their vision, etc. So that's another one. So in examples like this, I mean, in the work that you've done for Never Binge Again, is it a unique strategy for different types of people, or is there a general concept like exactly what you've done that somebody would learn from your work?
Well, first of all, when someone has a wolf breathing down their door, they're actually more likely to be successful. We just have to show them the practicalities of how to do that. We recently did a survey, and it was interesting because when I work with people, I try to develop, we use carrots and sticks, and mostly people like looking at the carrots. What's your life going to be like in 90 days if you stick to your plan?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing this? How, you fit into clothes, your knees are going to feel better, what's going to be better? And we try to flesh that out in detail. What I find in the surveys is that the most successful people are those who are not necessarily motivated by what's pulling them forward, but like a hungry bear that's chasing after them. So people who had a diabetes diagnosis and they're familiar with a relative who had amputations or lost toes or things like that, or had diabetic retinopathy or trouble with their vision and all that kind of thing, all the horrible things that accrue as diabetes progresses. Those people are much more likely to succeed. Now, in the end, you want to do both. You want to have both. I think so. But once people are really amped up their motivation and focused on why they want to do it and what's going to happen if they don't, they look at the Ghost of Christmas Future, then the procedure is very similar across the board. What's your single worst trigger food or behavior? What's one small rule that's not going to immediately take off the weight, but something you can and would do that will move the boat in the right direction. Like think of a giant boat in a shipping lane, and it takes a little bit of time and energy to turn it around. You're not going to, if you're going from New York to London and you want to get back to New York, and you're going to turn around midway, it's going to take a little while to turn around. So you're not going to be back in New York immediately. That's okay. What is it that's going to turn the ship in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it seems like it's getting a little worse in the short run, because when you're turning that shipping lane, when you're turning your boat in a shipping lane, it's still going to go towards London as it's turning. So for some people that could be something like, actually I remember a truck driver, I think, and he said he loves fast food. It's his only option.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he's not going to give up fast food. I shouldn't even bother talking to him about it. And I said, all right. And I said, so what's one small thing you could do that would move things in the right direction? And he says, I guess I could never go back for seconds again. And he doesn't go back for seconds. And a year and a half later, he's 150 pounds down. Because that started some momentum for him, and then he added another rule a little later on. And then he added some things that he always does, because this is not just about restriction. This is could be about things that you add, like I always put my fork down between bites, or I always have 5 servings of fruit vegetables every day, or I always write a hypothetical food plan before I go to bed, or I always have 2 large glasses of pure spring water when I get up in the morning. It's it can be an additive program as well. And so you start with one rule, and then that's like drawing a line in the sand and saying to your pig, I dare you to cross it. And then you listen very carefully for all the things that your pig might say to get you to cross the line. I forgot one piece, Brian. You don't have to call it a pig. I called it a pig. It was in my private journal. I didn't think the world was going to know about this. I really thought it was just a private way of my own recovery. And so when I wrote the book, I wrote all about the pig, and everybody thinks it's funny that there's a pig inside me. But some people have an emotional reaction to that word, and we're not really talking about a part of you. It's more like an organ, same as your bladder.
Yeah.
But still, you could call it a food demon or junkyard dog, or as long as it's not a cute and cuddly pet, you can do that.
Well, I'm sure there's other, more prolific explanations that people have chose to call their demon. Yeah. Okay, cool. So one rule, take one step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And then see what your pig says.
Uh-huh.
See what it says, write it down. See if you can find the logical perversion in what it's saying. Right?
So like too much, too little, or
I forget which example I used earlier. So if the pig says, we can just start tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Right? The truth is you can't just start tomorrow, because you're either reinforcing or extinguishing your addictions. When you have a craving, it's either going to get better or worse depending upon what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a hole, stop digging.
Mm-hmm.
Your pig will say, you've made so many promises and failed, you'll never succeed. You might as well just binge now. The logical perversion there is, if you're on a highway for 1,000 miles and you don't take an exit, that has no impact whatsoever on your ability to take the next one.
Mm-hmm.
It also ignores the fact that research suggests that people who lose weight and keep it off for good, at least 5 years, are distinguished from people who yo-yo diet in the number of attempts that they've made previously. The people who are successful in the long run have more attempts than the people who are only successful in the short run. Turns out that the name of the game is staying in the game until you win the game.
Stay in the game. I like it. I don't know if this is totally on topic, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. I mean, I'm listening to this, and I mean, so far the principles I hear are related to your experience of binging with food, but I mean, have people used this for other addictions? Alcohol, nicotine? Is that happening?
They use it for other addictions, but I don't advise that you use it for alcohol or drugs. The reason for that is there's a philosophy built into this program, which is to commit with perfection but forgive yourself with dignity. And so the metaphor that we use is, aiming at a bullseye as an Olympic archer.
Okay.
And when an Olympic, okay, so when you're aiming at the bullseye, the archer says to himself, "I can see the arrow going into the." It becomes one with the bullseye.
Yeah.
If he misses the bullseye, he doesn't say, "Oh, I'm a pathetic archer. I should just shoot all the arrows up into the arrow or into the audience." He says, "Exactly how much did I miss it by, and do I make the adjustments?" And then he forgives himself and commits again with perfection, so that he can purge his mind of all that doubt and insecurity, which would drain him from accomplishing the goal. The problem with doing this for drugs and alcohol is that it's not really okay to say to someone, commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity. If taking a drink is going to cause him to get behind the wheel of a car and kill someone or maim someone, then it's more of a moral issue, and you can't really. So there's a lot of the place that I learned this idea from is a book called Rational Recovery, and that book would help you with a very similar philosophy for drug and alcohol addiction, and it's by Jack Trimpey at rational.org.
Okay, I get it. So this is, it's crystal clear. One more thing, and I want to be respectful of your time here. Can you walk me through, Glenn, like a day in the life, doesn't have to be your life, of how somebody would talk to their pig? Like, are you getting up in the morning talking to your pig? Is there a common example that you could share with the audience? And
yeah, there is, sure. The idea is actually to not have to talk to your pig. The idea is to think of yourself like a city traffic planner, having to install traffic lights and stop signs and yield signs at intersections which present a variety of levels of danger. And once those traffic lights are installed and you've figured out where the dangerous intersections are in your own personal behavioral economy with food, then you learn how to drive, and initially you have to kind of study them and remember the rules of the road. But once you know how to drive, you don't really think about it. You're daydreaming, you can make phone calls, you can listen to music, you know what to do at a four-way stop sign, you know what to do at a yield sign.
Sure.
And so the idea ultimately is to not have to think about it at all. And having the discipline installed is what makes that possible. Now, in the beginning, your pig will not show you all of its squeals, and it will try to reorganize and overcome you the next day, the next week, the next month. And so what you might want to do is first thing in the morning, get up and say, "Okay, pig, give me your best shot. What's your best idea for why we should binge today? Let me have it." And see what it says. At minimum, even if you don't know the answer to if you don't know the logical perversion and what it's saying, then at least you're going to recognize it and ignore it. See, by definition, the pig's voice is any thought, feeling, or impulse or image that suggests that you will either now or in the future until the day you die have even one bite of pig slop, which is anything off your very well-constructed rule. And so you know that if something is the pig, that it is evil by definition. It's got no business in your brain. You have no business listening to it. So it helps if you can disempower it by looking for the logical flaw. But if you can't remember it, at least you know that it is the pig, and you could ignore it like you would ignore Hannibal Lecter inviting you for coffee.
Okay, good. I got it. That's great. Well, listen, this has been awesome, and I am hopes that those that have listened to this, will commit, as you say, to perfection, and forgive yourself with dignity, and end that food obsession that they have out there, and be the best you that you can be, or me that I can be. So you shared a lot with us today. For those that are interested in getting their hands on, if you will, the full meal deal, the book, how can they do that? Where can they find it?
We're going to get you a special website, special URL that Brian will append to the end of this audio, where you can get a whole bunch of special things. The first is you can get a free copy of the book Never Binge Again in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format.
Really?
And yeah,
Wow.
yeah. The paperback and the Audible we do charge for, and we have other books we charge for, but you get a free copy of the main book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. And because I know this is a really weird thing, you must be saying, why in the world does Brian have a psychologist on that has a pig inside of him? I don't get it, right? It sounds really harsh, it sounds really bizarre, but if you listen to me coach some people through full sessions, you'll see that they transform from feeling helpless and powerless and confused to feeling hopeful and enthusiastic and powerful in just one session. So I want you to actually hear their transformation and get some hope. And finally, I know that it can be a little overwhelming to think about how to put together your own food rules and food plans, so I have a bunch of examples for you. And it doesn't matter what dietary philosophy you choose. This is a diet agnostic program. You can see a set of starter rules for ketogenic versus vegan versus macrobiotic versus point counting versus calorie counting versus low carb versus high carb. Whatever you can imagine, there is a set of starter templates for you. It's all at the special URL that Brian's going to give you. Free book, free set of starter templates, and free recorded coaching sessions.
Oh, wow. So book, session, and plans. So
Yep.
for those that have been listening, I'll make it easy. I'll put it right below the interview here. That's awesome, Glenn. Appreciate that. Very generous of you. So thank you in closing for coming out and investing some time with us today and sharing this wonderful message and all the free gifts that you're offering us. Very cool.
Thanks, man.
All right. Good stuff.